Welcome to She Sells Radio. If you are looking to be massively empowered and inspired today, you're going to want to listen in on this conversation. And I will give a brief disclaimer. My voice is a little funky. The boys have brought something home. But I was like, this conversation is so important and so powerful. There was no way I wanted to reschedule it. So I have got my dear friend, Stephen Scoggins, here on the podcast with us. I met Stephen a couple of years ago through some mutual friends, Rory and AJ Vaden, and we were working together on a consulting project. And my first impression of Stephen was just through his credentials, like that he's an 8-figure serial entrepreneur, super successful in what he does. And then I think it was on like day 2 of us working together, he just mentioned at one point that he had been homeless at one point. And I was like, there is so much more than meets the surface to this man than you might know at first glance. And getting to know him better and work with him on multiple projects now over the years, I've seen what a phenomenal human being, what an incredible connector, what an incredible thought leader he is. And I wanted to bring him here to you on the show today to talk about how do we cultivate that unstoppable energy towards your goals, as well as how to really build a self-concept and a self-image that's in alignment with achieving your biggest and wildest dreams, because Stephen has done some pretty incredible things and is continuing to do that today. So I'm going to give you just a bit of his formal bio here, and then we're going to dive in. So from homelessness to heartfelt industry leader, Stephen Scoggins is an 8-figure serial entrepreneur of multiple businesses who has dedicated himself to serving the person he used to be. Stephen is an author and the host of the syndicated top-rated hit podcast, Stuck to Unstoppable. He's been featured in media like Forbes, Entrepreneur, Thrive Global, Evan Carmichael's Top 10, and many more. Stephen, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have this time with you today.
Oh, are you kidding me? Anytime I get a chance to hang out with you, I'm in.
Well, we were just talking in the pre-chat. You've got so many exciting things going on right now, and we were talking about it. And I was like, Stephen, it wouldn't matter. Like, I don't need to know details on anything that you're doing. If you're like, hey, Elise, I've got this thing going on, I'm like, I'm there. Like that is the caliber of who you are. And for everyone listening, I think that's so important to think about, like, for your own reputation. Have you built a reputation based on heartfelt service, looking out for other people, where no matter what you put out there, the people who know you are like, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge piece of sales too, and achieving our
Yeah.
sales goals is building that reputation. So okay, we're going to dive in, because I know we're going to take the full time and have a lot to talk about here. But Stephen, where I would love to start with you, one of the things that I truly believe and that I teach my clients is that our results will never supersede our identity. Our results will never supersede our identity. And I think this is going to be fun for me, because I'm going to get to know more of your journey too. From what I know about your journey, at one point you had an identity of someone who was in homelessness. And then at another point, and other points, you've had an identity of someone who is a serial 8-figure, very successful entrepreneur. So can you tell us a bit about your backstory of that journey? And if you can weave in some of how your self-image shifted over the course of the journey. I want everyone to really listen for this, because our self-concept and our self-image is everything on this journey towards our goals. So take that where you will, my friend. And I'd love to hear a little bit more of the backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny. I was mentioning before we hopped on the air. I was like, well, if I tell too many stories, we're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah.
So I'll try to keep it light and brief. But yeah, I grew up in unfortunately, like a lot of American households nowadays, which breaks my heart, which was a broken household. My mother and father were not healed people before they met each other. And that just compounded. My father struggled with alcohol for a number of years. My mother, I would dare say, struggled with some mental illness off and on. And as a result, you had 2 toxic people trying to have a whole relationship, which we know doesn't work. Now I am happy to say they're both fantastic grandparents, and they've both done a tremendous amount of healing. They're both awesome human beings. I'm so proud of their journey. But earlier in my life, the tricky part was I was so unstable because of that relationship that they ended up splitting up and going their separate ways. And lo and behold, I ended up living with my grandmother, my brother and I. And honestly, that was the first time I ever had that I can remember having consistent empowerment, encouragement, like empathy, compassion. At the same time, it was not impossible for my nanny to pop me in the mouth if I had said something stupid, because I grew up in the Southern place where ass whooping's all right, kind of thing. So
yeah,
So we went through all that. And then unfortunately, she passed away at the age, I think I was 11 years old when she passed away. And obviously my parents came back into the picture really quickly. And I don't know if it was before she passed, right as she passed, after she passed, because it was kind of a blur. But my one and only had passed away. It's essentially what it boiled down to. And for some reason, I went to go live with my father, and my little brother went to go live with my mother. And to this day, I'm not exactly sure what that was. I do know that I had a decision in it. But I do know that, and I do know that my father promised me martial arts lessons, which I was big into martial arts and wearing ninja mask when I was a kid and all kinds of silly stuff. And it's funny. He promised me this dream, and then I walked into probably my first really solid understanding of an area of lack. Some would call it poverty. Some would call it, just having an essence of lack. We moved into an old broken home, a broken trailer park, or broken trailer up in the Fuquay Arena area, which is like 40 minutes from where we're at today. Immediately, literally, I think I moved in on a Friday evening, and on Saturday morning, I was woken up at 5 a.m. to go carry studs, and was thrust in the construction industry, barely waking up, rubbing my eyes every morning, and then, working in the hot sun and the cold weather and all kinds of stuff. If I wasn't in school, I was at work. And, early on, you're as a kid, you're like, what am I doing out here? Like, I need to be like watching Nickelodeon or something. And it wasn't too far along that I actually felt like I had a great sense of understanding that my life was not going to be the dream that was forecast to me, or the dream that was promised to me. And then as things went on, I also became more and more aware that if I was going to do something with my life, I was probably going to have to do it myself. Now that awareness came like later, I think, but at the end of the day, gosh, that was our life for a number of years. My father got remarried. He had built a construction business with his former wife's father, and it did really well. We went from the trailer to a really nice home in Raleigh, and we started having really nice Christmases, and we started having, my dad would, bought some new vehicles, and for my stepmother and himself, and so at that point I felt like, okay, cool, things are going good. I'm in junior high, I'm in the clique, so to speak, kind of deal. And yeah, it wasn't too much longer after that unfortunately my dad lost his business. And the reason I mentioned that part of the story is because there's something really important here when it comes to identity that I think is a big takeaway. I think the comment I'm about to share with you was the core of the identity that I chose to live. And I say that chose because I think we all can choose which identity we get to live. Yeah. I chose to live for a number of years, all the way into the point of homelessness, which I can get into in a little bit. But the reality is my father said, this is after losing his business, a brokenhearted man, going through a tremendous amount of trouble, having to declare bankruptcy, having vehicles repossessed, going through pretty much anything that could be, tied to, if you will, kind of the scenario of what most of us tie our identity to, which is stuff, things, success, reward, right? So I'll never forget this. He looks at me and he's got tears in his eyes. He says, always remember, Scoggins don't get ahead. They just get by. Oh, wow. And, even then something in my spirit said that's a lie, but I couldn't pick up on it like early on. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the folks that I know that we've worked with, just, different entrepreneurs and different stuff, they all have, in many respects, the ones that are becoming super successful have chosen to fight through some form of limiting belief. And whether or not that was a belief they had on the inside of self-worth, or was a belief that came on the outside. Our good friend Rory, you mentioned him, one of the podcasts he put me on probably 2 years ago. I had this epiphany, and he said, what do you think, what do you think has held you back from really pursuing your personal brand and all this kind of stuff? And in that moment, I said, well, Rory, honestly, I've never been asked that question before. I'm not really sure. You know what? I do know what it is. Rory, am I worthy of a voice? Wow. Right. So it all ties back to an early stage worthiness kind of issue. And I find that all entrepreneurs struggle with insecurity. All entrepreneurs struggle with isolation. At times, they all struggle with pride and arrogance. At times, they all struggle with a lack of humility, or being overly humble in many respects, where they're taken advantage of. So I find that the life of the entrepreneur is more of a journey of aspiration, right? Rather than kind of looking at your circumstance. And one of my friends, John Gordon, he had me on one of his recent virtual events, which was a simple joy. And Out of it came out of these words. And I feel like it kind of resonates because it's like, we talked about the from, now where's the to? He asked me, so what's, kind of what was the major catalyst? What was the kind of the big difference? And I discovered that your emotional intensity has to be tied to your aspirational identity. So if you take all of your emotions, you take all of your resources, everything you think, you feel, whether or not you're praying, you're meditating, you're reading, you're watching TV programs, if all of that energy is focused on the old you, you will never discover the new you.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Your emotional intensity has to be tied to your aspirational identity. I get that,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And it's okay for your aspirations to compound over time. Right. When I first started my business, I literally started out of the construction trash piles to kind of get it going. Everybody that knows me close enough knows that I was literally sleeping in a borrowed friend's car when I started my first company.
Wow.
And my first aspirational identity was to get secure, get shelter, get food. Right. And then it was like, how do I make my first $10,000? Then how do I make my first or my next, you see what I'm saying? It's a compounding effect.
Yes.
And your aspirational identity must always be set in front of your current role or your current level of identity. In other words, you have to program yourself because the entire world's trying to program you on a regular basis.
Yes. How do you keep going? So we'll weave in a little more of the story here, but I think what you just said is so important about the aspirational identity piece. How do you keep that front of mind when you're looking at current surroundings and you're sleeping in a friend's car, and yet you've started your business and you've got, your dad told you this thing, Stephen or Scoggins don't get ahead, they just get by. And so you probably got some of that playing in the background. You've got the early programming of instability, insecurity that was put into your nervous system and into your subconscious mind at an early age. How do you not let everything be influenced by current circumstances and keep going back to the vision and the aspirational identity when you don't love what's surrounding you?
Well, I think it comes down to three things. The first of which is an awakening, if you will. Someone who has an awakening has a position of, I'm going to understand how my subconscious came into being to begin with. So I refer to it as you have to make the conscious, like right now we all operate off a program and we get up, we do the same thing every day. We'll turn the dial, like the fact that you use a right hand versus a left hand on a regular basis is all programmed, right? It's all at some point in time, they handed you a pen in a right hand and it was just easier for you. So you just stuck with it. Right. Whereas somebody else had put a pen in the left hand, it was easier for them. Right. It's kind of the same thing. So it's like an element of it. The difference between people that I see that are 6-figure entrepreneurs or earlier or 8-figure, 9-figure, 10-figure is those that are 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs. They spend a lot more time becoming more conscious of their subconscious.
Oh,
so the things that are going into their mind, the things that they're reading, the resources, all that kind of stuff, the why, right? So I had to ask myself at one time, why do Scoggins only get by and not get ahead? Why?
Yeah.
Who made up that rule? Where'd that rule come from?
Yes.
Right. For some, it might be, they might've gone through a divorce and it's like, well, I'm a failure as a spouse. Like they assign identity to an event rather than seeing the event as an escalation path to a new future. So I think making the subconscious more conscious is a key tactic. Number 2 is understanding how programming works, right? Programming works by repetitive action and beliefs over time. And for me, programming is a choice. So again, I go back to, am I choosing to program myself or am I allowing others or my operating system to continue the program it's always known? Right. So I'll give you an example. My father gave me that comment and that, haunted me for a number of years. And of course, I just watched him continue to struggle for a number of years, so much so that I had to drop out of high school to help pay the bills and all kinds of stuff. So I never graduated high school. I didn't know I had ADHD and dyslexia at the time. That was kind of unique. I just knew I was a creative problem solver, even though I couldn't get the grades up, right? My grades would be stuck at a C or B at kind of the best. But I'll never forget this. My first mentor, and my audience has heard me talk about this a bazillion times, probably so much you're probably tired of hearing it. But he pulled me down with my dad's framing crew one afternoon and he asked me, he said, what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And of course, as somebody who was in kind of more or less impoverished, I wouldn't say I was like we couldn't eat, but we definitely had a hard time paying our bills. Okay. In that moment, I was like, well, of course it's money. It has to be money. I mean, you have money. My dad doesn't have money. Right. So every time like we wanted something, we would go to him and ask for a loan. You see what I'm saying? Like that's a poverty style thinking.
Yeah.
Well, he actually told me in that moment, he goes, absolutely not. It's the way they think. Now, the next question unprogrammed the prior statement from my father. All right. So watch this. Remember the prior statement, Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by. Okay. Now we're going to overwrite that program with this. Stephen, do you want to learn to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father?
Yeah.
Okay. Contrast. So sometimes it takes contrast to understand where the program lies. The contrast was my father was always borrowing, never repaying, working his ever loving butt off. I have a very, very high level of work ethic. And I know I got from my father. Okay. Out of repetitive behaviors, right? Every day at 5 a.m., bust your butt till dark, do it all over again. Right. Steve, on the other hand, was just as diligent with the work, but he was 10 times more generous. Therefore, because I believe that because of the generosity within his soul, the wisdom that came to actually learn to earn and compound over time. So Steve, for example, was someone who I watched literally one time give $1,000 tip under a basket of hush puppies to a single waitress, you know, a mother of one. Yeah. Right. And then he and his wife walk out the building as if nothing ever happened. It was like normal, like, you know, not even thinking about it. Yeah. And the waitress come out, lift the basket of hush puppies, thinking she got stiffed, and then lift the back and then see $1,000 and get wrecked, like on their knees on the floor crying. Cause all of a sudden she could pay a bill or something other, you know what I'm saying? Like I watched him do that so many times. I watched him be a very frugal businessman. Like if you were going to try to take advantage of him, he would stop you in your tracks. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that gave me the contrast. So if we take the programming aspects, now we're going to program the consciousness that we're now aware of based on a choice to actually want and desire. Okay. Yeah. Which takes me to the third thing. The third thing that I do specifically, as I have a daily routine that basically predisposes or chooses for me that I'm going to do this, and this to continue my personal growth. Quick example. I get up at 5:30 every day. I meditate and I pray. I do both. I pray asking for God to give me chances to serve. I pray asking for him to give me wisdom. I pray for him to ask me to, for me to have opportunity to do whatever he's called me to do, that I'm awakened to what he's called me to do, that in a moment I can talk to a team member, a client, somebody on the street, and he gives me a word for them. I'm going to turn and give it to him. I want to be that receptive. I want to have that kind of relationship. On the meditating side, I began doing something because I understand programming is repetition, right? It's information meets repetition, information, repetition, information, repetition. Now, granted, you'll take action on the information, but it's the same kind of concept. A mantra that I just recently started doing probably 6 or 8 months ago, and I was sharing with you offline that, hey, things are really starting to open up in a couple of key categories. Here's my mantra. I am healthy. I am wealthy. I am wise, and I'm a steward of the Most High. I am healthy, I am wealthy, I am wise, and I'm a steward of the Most High. Now, the intent behind the mantra has to be just as powerful as the mantra itself. So when I say I'm healthy, I'm healthy. My blood's flowing at all levels. My energy is like corresponding through my fingertips. We could do some Star Wars kind of like zapping over here kind of thing. When I'm talking about wealthy, I'm not talking about just monetary. Like I'm talking about the wholeness of my relationships, the wholeness of my opportunity, right? I know some very, very, very people that I consider very wealthy who don't do that well financially because they choose not to, not because they're incapable. They just don't want to. I also know some very wealthy people, 9-10 figure earners that are very unhappy, right? So the amount of resource is not connected to the rate of happiness. What's connected to the rate of happiness is the intent behind that, what you pour into your life. Wow.
Wow. That's amazing. If there's anything else, keep going. But that one piece, I think I want to pause on, because people will say like, I can only feel wealthy when I have X amount in the bank. Right. And I was listening to something, I think it was from Oprah, this weekend, but a piece about gratitude. And it was like, if you want to feel really wealthy, look at everything in your life that you have that money can't buy.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you talk about that, because it's not just the monetary piece, although that does flow when we create the identity of someone who's wealthy. It's all the other elements as well.
Well, let's talk about alignment for just a second, right?
Please. Yeah.
In order for our soul to align with our authentic self, you have to become faithful with the little and grateful with the outcome. Okay. So the Bible says, and I'm a Jesus guy. I'm an energy guy, but I'm also a Jesus guy. I can do both. And I see, when I look at the two in scripture, I see it all over the place. But in the Bible specifically, it says, if you are faithful with the little, I will make you a master over much. Most people want to be made a master over much without doing the work to be faithful with the little. So if you can learn to be faithful and grateful with the little, then you will be made master over much. You know, I had the privilege as your friend to watch, like, you explode in business. Like, you went from here and then exploded to another level.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I personally believe it's because you stewarded, you took the time to, like, make sure you were serving with the servant's heart. Right. I believe great selling actually starts with great servanthood. Right. You don't sell them the product you want to sell them. You sell them the product they need. Right. And you do it from that resource, and sometimes you just give them out of service. And because of that, the spirit of reciprocity is built, and then they want to buy. You know, you take all of those different types of things, and it all comes down to being faithful with the little and to be made master over much.
Yes. Yes. So for you on that journey to building this self-concept and the self-image and becoming the level of success that you are today, one thing you said earlier about your mentor, Steve, I think is so powerful. Okay, my voice is going to hold on through this interview.
We got you.
Yep, I'm calling it in. He asked you that question about, do you want to learn how I think? Or something along those lines. I think that is so important, Stephen. I know when I had, you kind of mentioned just now, like, my own quantum leap experience for the first time, I had hired a mentor not to give me a tactical strategy, but I knew, like, enough of this stuff to be dangerous, and enough of this stuff to know that if I could learn how she thought, that was what I actually needed to learn, because I knew that I was getting the same results over and over again, because I was thinking these repetitive thoughts. So has that been the biggest shift for you in terms of just learning how to think differently?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The easy answer is yes. A couple of things. This is why your circle of influence is so powerful, because most of thought is actually caught. So when you and I hang out, for example, we talk about big things and big dreams and big goals.
Yeah.
If I was to go talk to someone who's still homeless, for example, we're not going to have the same conversation. And if I spend more time with you than I spend more time with the homeless crowd, then that's going to slow my development versus grow my development.
Yes.
Okay. So when I look at mentors specifically, I believe a mentor comes in the moment that you need them most. Right. And a specific, like, I need to improve my financial resource. Great. I want to talk to this mentor on finances. I need to improve my emotional intelligence. Great. I need to talk to this mentor on my emotional intelligence. It's very rare that you can go to one mentor that can do the whole around approach. Very rare.
Yes.
Okay. Unless that person has done tremendous amount of work. And I call them like getting to the sage level, if that makes any sense. They're kind of a sage, like Gandalf, or, you know, big old white beard or whatever, or a long white ponytail, you know, that kind of setup. So I say that because when it comes down to learning from the mentor, learning of the information you need to learn, learning to think like an 8-figure entrepreneur, there's going to be certain things you're going to catch. And as you catch things, you're going to question things. Okay. So you catch it. Hey, Steve, I saw you do this. Why did you do it?
Yeah.
Most people won't ask, why did you do it? How did you do it? They'll ask how, actually. They won't ask what or why. Right. Because there's always an intangible. I'm actually working on a resource right now that it's right here in front of me. Called How 8-Figure Entrepreneurs Think, or Mindsets of an 8-Figure Entrepreneur, something like that. And one of the things I jotted down was on just understanding the season of business that you're in. I did a private mastermind with Evan Carmichael up at his house in Toronto a few months back. And he has equity in a lot of different businesses, and he brought all of his business owners to that meet and greet, if you will, that mastermind. And I got to see firsthand, like, what they were all struggling with. The number one thing they were struggling with is impatience.
Oh, wow.
They all wanted it now. I want to be here now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to do that. It's all impatient. So by understanding, for example, the 5 seasons of building a business, once you understand the 5 seasons, you can identify what season you're in, and then also what needs to happen to move you to the next season.
Wow.
All right. So if you think about, we all know that right now in North Carolina, it's summer or summer-ish. It's hot and muggy today, unfortunately.
Yep.
Right. In a normal world, North Carolina used to have 4 distinct seasons. They're kind of merged together now, but there used to be 4 distinct seasons. But you know that, at the end of summer is going to equal fall, and that fall is going to go into winter, and winter is going to go into spring, right? It's the season. So if I know that I'm heading into winter or heading into fall, that means I probably need to buy some more jeans, maybe a nicer coat, maybe a light coat or whatever, maybe some hiking shoes if I want to go out and enjoy the hiking weather up by the mountains or something like that. I'm probably not going to go to do too many beach trips because the water's going to be cold, and I'm going to be cold, and that kind of thing. So your business is exactly the same way. Okay. All businesses have seasons. The only difference is as you scale, you'll repeat the seasons, but when you're getting going, it's actually fairly linear. Okay. Here's what I mean. The first season of building a business is the startup phase, right? That's my heart. I love startup entrepreneurs because it's all hustle and grind and like, let's make something happen. I'm creating something from nothing and all that kind of stuff. That means you're probably shooting from the hip a lot. You're just trying to, you're probably not being super selective with your choices or your relationships or the people that are mentoring you or the business that you're building. You're probably just like, does this work? Yes or no? Okay. Didn't work. Okay. I'm gonna do something different, right? There's a lot of pivoting going on. Okay. There's actually a time and a place for that. That's an experience builder. Okay. But let's say that, okay, I've got something moving, right? It's not optimized, but I got something moving. Well, the next phase is the season, if you will, is testing. Now I got to test what I did. And can I actually make money at this? Am I actually serving the marketplace? Does the marketplace even want what I have? Right? How many times as thought leaders specifically are we pivoting on content? Right? Yeah, does this serve you? Well, no, it doesn't serve me. Well, what would serve you? I mean, this whole 8 thoughts or of a 8-figure mindset, like this came out of a survey. One of my clients said, hey guys, I'm thinking about creating a new resource. It'll be free. It might be video. It might be PDF. It might be a combination of both. What do you think? Well, honestly, we want to know how you think because you've already done something I haven't done. Yes. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, that's me testing. I'm testing. Like, does this work? Right. Once I understand.
Super quick. I just want to pause you on that because some people will say like, your clients don't know what they need. You need to know what your clients need and base it off of that. But you're on the path of survey the audience, ask the audience. And that's what's really, I like hearing differing perspectives on this. Cause I think it's like, there's not really a right or wrong. It's what do you believe and what's in alignment. So I just wanted to ask. Well,
I'll tell you what, a time I got that wrong. So I went out and invested $300,000 in putting together a major live event with major thought leaders in October of 2021 called Transform You. Now, at its heart, that's my heart, right? I want to ignite what's inside of you so you can become the best of you, period. Okay. Here's what I realized. Did you know that most people don't actually want to buy life mastery products or content? Why? Because they don't want to admit they got problems in their life. Okay. So I go and spend the money. I don't have the resource. I don't have the critical mass from attendees. I ended up having an incredible event. I got all kinds of footage. It was fantastic footage. My thought leader friends did me right. All that worked out, but I didn't have the audience attendance that I really wanted. Now, contrast that to a few years later, I had this epiphany after talking to one of my clients. And they were like, what we really need is like a startup program. I'm like, really? Okay. Huh. Hey guys, we're going to launch this new platform. What if we change the life mastery content out for the business content? I love that idea. Okay, great. What are we going to call it? Well, how about Unstoppable Startup? Right? Because unstoppable is my word. Yes. And as we started kind of like going into that, I said, well, rather than me doing like a paid event, I tell you what, we'll just do a filming. So I'm going to invite a couple like key thought leader friends like yourself and Anton come out. And we're just going to serve the audience. We're not going to charge anything. We're just going to serve the audience and record it. Yeah. Right. We had a much larger turnout for that event than we've ever had for anything else. Why? Because people want to understand how to build a business. And the good news is as they're building their business, I can help them build themselves.
Yes.
You see, it's a subtle pivot.
Weave it in.
that changes the necessity for people wanting to be part of it. Right. So I wouldn't have done that had I not done a testing phase. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you understand where you're at in your process, if everything's clicking and everything's working and everything's starting to really come together, now it's time to start looking at the third phase, which is investing. Right? How are you investing in your processes, your system, your team? Do you get a qualified bookkeeper right now? Do you spend the money on an executive assistant? Like, now you're starting to go from tactical thinking to strategical thinking. Okay. And that's a whole nother time frame that it takes time to just kind of itemize that stuff out. Well, once you've done that, then you're into scaling.
Mm-hmm.
All scaling is a compounding of what works.
Love that.
It's a compounding and a duplication of what works. And then at the final phase, you get to choose, do I want to operate this business for the rest of my life or do I want to sell it? And both are okay. So just seriously, and that's just one difference between how an 8-figure entrepreneur thinks versus a 6-figure entrepreneur thinks. A 6-figure entrepreneur is thinking about what's in front of them.
Yeah.
An 8-figure entrepreneur is what do I need to do to build the next 5 to 10 years? And that same mindset will transition to a 9-figure mindset.
I think that's so helpful. We've had quite a few 7-figure, a couple 8-figure entrepreneurs on the show, and 9-figure a couple of times, but like learning the difference in the mindset. And for everyone listening, I want you to really get this, like, it's learning how to think like, I love your phrase, the aspirational identity that you're looking to create. I mean, at the end of the day, it's that, and then embodying that. And that's something that I practice every day. And I know it's like for the next aspirational identity, I don't completely embody her yet because I'm not there yet, but it's every day asking yourself.
But you've learned to identify her.
Yeah. Good point.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You identify your aspirational identity.
Yeah.
By watching your mentors and the things that you love most about them. So I think your aspirational identity is built on the things you want to achieve, but more importantly, the people that you admire most and what you admire most about them, and letting go of the things that don't serve them or don't serve you. That's how you end up well-rounded with the mentors that you have. So once you can identify who you want to become, now you can create a roadmap to get there.
Wow. That's so powerful. I want to ask you this because part of this is like a very selfish question. And then I think it will also hopefully serve everyone who's listening. So I know you'll be able to relate to this in a different way. I've had some opportunities open up recently where I'm like, the old version of me, the smaller version of me is like, wait, like, do they know who I am? Like, are that like, is this really happening? Is this like, do I deserve this type of thing? I know you've continued to up level your brand and your impact. You recently hosted an event, a live event for Ed My Led, and you're like, you're building, I think, one of the most influential personal brands out there today.
Oh, thank you.
How do you, I genuinely mean that. Does that part of you that felt unworthy of having a voice that you mentioned before, does that part ever come up? And if so, what do you do when that shows up?
So the answer is yes. However, it's more limited than it used to be. Thank God. What do I do? So I'll give you the Ed My Led event is something that's probably a good understanding, because I was given an opportunity to serve Ed and the team along with 12 other A-list thought leaders at the same stage at the same time in our facility. I had two possible postures going into that event. One is, do they recognize me? Do they even see me? Or the second is I'm ready to be on the same level. So I chose to go in as I'm ready to be on the same level. I've achieved, in some cases, even he had amazing thought leaders on the stage. In some cases, I've already achieved more business success than many of them have. Not taking it away from, because they're amazing human beings and they do wonderful things. But what I'm saying is some of it is reminding yourself of the value you've already created. A lot of us like to take on our criticisms and then offload our reward. Like we'll pick ourselves apart. Hey, this is going wrong. I don't do right here. I don't think right here. Da, da, da. Meanwhile, you may have already built a 7, 8, 9-figure business, and you have to understand how rare that is. Right? The average business, and we did this study during Unstoppable Startup. The average business, over 80% of the businesses will fail in the first 2 years.
Wow.
Right? So the fact that you made it past that and created revenue and continued on, you see what I'm saying, is a big deal. Businesses that make it to 7 figures, only about 5% of businesses ever make it to 7 figures.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? So it's recognizing kind of where you are in the journey. Again, we get so focused on how we see what we perceive in the mirror that we're not paying any attention to what has already taken place. So one of the things that I do internally is I'm like, I'm already ready to be at this level. That level will show itself and refine itself as I go there. I'm going to come in with a servant's heart, right? So I don't think anybody in that experience, and God forbid if they do, I'll have to reconcile it, but I don't think anybody around me can come in and say, Stephen's coming in with an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't asked any of those thought leaders for anything.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. You know, a lot of people in the thought leadership world are like, oh, I need a seat. I want to earn a seat at the table. Why? Why do you need to sit at that table? I'm going to go build my own table. Why don't you come over here and hang out with me? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the reality is when it comes to a life of impact and service, it doesn't matter about the table. It just matters whether or not you're effective.
That's a mic drop moment. That's a mic drop moment. Choosing the posture, recognizing what you've already done, taking ownership of what you've already done. Yeah. So anything else you want to add to that?
I don't know. If there's anything else from in that moment is, again, I think it's that hot pursuit of your aspirational identity. Again, where Tony says this, he's like, where your energy flow, where your energy flows, your focus goes, or something along those lines. But it's like where you focus, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to focus, why not focus on the aspirational to you? Why not, go to smallwood.com, and I'm not a people, whatever influencer firm or nothing like that. But there's this program or this place where you can get these little pictures and you can put them on little pads and hang them on your wall like a picture. Okay. Most people, when they do a vision board, they're writing stuff on a vision board. They're, taking magazine clippings and whatnot. Why not go ahead and do it really nice? Why not make it a centerpiece in your house? Right. So one of my next purchases, it won't be this year. It won't be this year, it will be later. Is I will probably own a private plane, and I'm going to want, and I don't want a private plane to say I own a private plane. In fact, I probably won't post about social or whatever. I want a private plane because you have immense tax benefits. Right. So again, 8-figure, 9-figure thinks, how can I keep more of what I earn rather than how can I earn more? You said there's subtle nuances. But the aspirational identity that's tied to it is I'm someone worthy of wealth because I'm going to steward it. One of the commitments I have to myself is if I can afford to buy a plane, I can afford to give an equal measure of what the plane affords to over here to a couple of different entities. That's my goal. I want to be that reverse tither. I want to give away 90%, live off 10, which means if I'm going to have a very nice lifestyle at that level, living off of 10, I have to do very well.
It requires a great deal of wealth. Yeah. Yeah. This is so powerful. I know you've got just a couple minutes. I want to ask first, you've got an incredible online program. And I think what's really, really cool listening to you speak here is someone who's listening, and I've gotten so much from this today too. There's so much to learning to think the way that Stephen thinks. And he walks his talk, you've put yourself in the rooms with people to learn from, to shift the mindset, to come from that lack and scarcity mindset into a really abundant, generous, service-minded mindset. But we can be there and we can have an unsuccessful business, or we can be there and we can build and scale very impactful businesses that live out our purpose and change the world. And so you've got both, which I think is so powerful. And I also love that you love helping people in the startup journey. That's not as much my jam. I don't love the mechanics of the startup. I love teaching people more of the, the sales piece.
Yeah. Well, that's why you're in there. That's why that's why I brought you in to teach everybody how to sell.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So tell everyone, Stephen, if they're listening, how can they learn more about your online program? How can they get involved? Because I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for them. Yeah,
absolutely. So to make it super easy, we'll obviously have your team have a private link just for your folks. But in short, it's called Unstoppable Online, Unstoppable-Online. And we're going to let you into that school. There's already 48 hours of video training along with an 80-page workbook that takes you step by step on building a business. It is something that took me almost 6 months to create, just from a content perspective, because I had to think about what didn't work as much as I thought about what worked. But to make it even better, we've done a couple of different things. We're going to have specific cohorts inside the platform that we're going to have like, quarterly calls, everybody together, monthly calls, everybody together. And then I'm going to bring in amazing thought leaders once a month. Some of them are very, very notable. Some of them should be very notable and just you don't know them yet. And I'm bringing all of that together to build a community of what I'm calling empowering entrepreneurs. An empowering entrepreneur is trying to build something outside of themselves. They just see their entrepreneurship venture as the bus to kind of like steward it, basically. Like I want to build social empowered, if you will, entrepreneurs, because this may blow your mind a little bit. There was a study done 3 years ago that talked about the world's problems, everything from homelessness to trafficking to all kinds of things, right? What will blow your mind is so many people are praying to God all the time. Hey, God, please help us fix this issue. Please help us do this. Please help us do that. What will blow your mind is inside the professing Christian body of church. If you look at it from a financial perspective alone, there's enough wealth to solve all of it and then some. Wow. Which means God has already answered the prayer, but it's the entrepreneurs that haven't stepped up to the plate. And I want to be one of the ones that encourages the entrepreneurs to step up to the plate and do good in the world, because we are uniquely qualified to build something out of nothing.
Wow.
So let's create a movement.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. That's incredible. We'll link the program in the show notes. I think everyone should go check that out and get involved. And then final question, and oh my gosh, my voice it's made it kind of, we're coming in the home stretch here, but I would love, Stephen, if you could share speaking to yourself when you were living in the car from now, right? You are now very much, you probably couldn't even think of where you are now from that place. You weren't yet
not even
able to conceptualize this,
Yeah.
right? So it's like the journey is pretty incredible. But you now, speaking back to Stephen at that moment, what did he need to know or hear to start to make that shift?
So I think what he needed to hear is what I heard about 10 minutes before I almost took my life out of a high school girlfriend's mother that kind of was like my surrogate mom going up through high school when I was going through all the dropping out of high school and all this kind of stuff. And she made me scream at the top of my lungs, this too shall pass, and what comes next will be greater. So whatever you're facing right now, bad, good, or whatever, it's going to pass. And the next thing is greater than the first thing. It always is greater than the next thing is always going to be greater and greater and greater if you focus on your aspirational identity. Oh
my gosh. I want to go back and listen to this again and again. I got so much out of this. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Truly. Thank you. For my listeners, gosh, go connect with Stephen, follow him online, listen to his podcast. We'll link that in the show notes too. Get involved in the program online. I mean, again, it's one thing to have a mindset of abundance, generosity. It's another thing to know how to build and scale a successful business. It is a rare thing, I think, to have one place where you can get with somebody who embodies all of that and can teach you both the mechanics as well as the inner work, and has made that shift himself. So Stephen, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Anytime I can hang out with my sister, I'm down for it.
I love it. I love it. All right. To you, my listener, so grateful for you. Thank you for listening to this interview. I'm going to go drink some hot tea and rest my voice, but I was like, I've got to have this conversation because I know it's going to be so powerful. Thank you as always for being a listener to She Sells Radio, and I'll see you on our next episode.